Agile Manifesto, 4 values and 12 principles. Now, let's talk about the Agile Manifesto. As I said, the creation or introduction of Agile came with the release of the Agile Manifesto, which is a detailed manifesto based on which all the Agile methodologies are created. It is a document that identifies 4 key values and 12 principles that its authors believe software developers should use to guide their work. Formerly called the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, it was produced by 17 developers during an outing on February 2001. This manifesto details out the values and principles of Agile processes. 4 values of Agile. Here are the 4 values of Agile: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This is not to say that processes and tools are not important, but they do introduce issues or challenges such as delay due to bureaucracy, lack of flexibility to move faster, for example, delays because of the approval which is not happening. So in order to bypass these challenges, Agile methodology recommends that teams should rely and emphasize more on individuals and interactions in order to move forward during the project. No matter how well researched your process and high-tech your tools are, it's the team you work with and the way you work together that will determine the success of the project. So your team and their ability to communicate effectively and efficiently is more valuable than the processes they follow or the tools they use. This does not mean that Agile discourages formalized processes or tools. Both can be helpful in providing structure for your team and facilitating interactions, but at the end of the day, they come second, because processes and tools are worthless if your team cannot communicate. But put a smart, motivated team up to a task without any processes or tools to manage the project, and chances are they will find some way to get the project done successfully. So the second value of the Agile Manifesto is that working products over comprehensive documentation. So in the waterfall model, for example, during the requirement gathering and design phases, there is detailed documentation that is made and which takes a lot of effort in creating it. The main challenge with extensive documentation is when change is required. So making changes to these documentations adds up additional effort. As you have understood, traditional product development processes often required extensive documentation before a single line of code was written. So under the Agile philosophy, getting software in the hands of the customers is the highest priority. After all, how are you going to improve your product if you do not get it out in the wild and collect feedback from real users? So while this value highlights the importance of shipping or delivering your software over letting documentation be a bottleneck, it's important to note that documentation in itself is not a bad thing, as long as you don't overdo it. So with Agile, documentation is updated as we keep adding up new features. Those small updates are consolidated over a period of time, and by the time the product ends, we will have a comprehensive documentation. So this way of doing it saves a lot of time. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is not to say that contracts are not important. We all know that any engagement or any business partnership cannot happen without a contract. Agile emphasizes the value of customer-centric techniques over product-centric methods in software development. Although contracts will always have a role in business, talking to customers about their requirements and issues is far more effective than just listing the services you will provide to them. So traditional development models like waterfall that were focused on the product allowed contracts to control what was ultimately delivered, which created a lot of space for unrealistic expectations. But the Agile methodology and its various frameworks encourages incorporating a continuous client feedback loop into the development life cycles. So under the Agile methodology, the customer collaboration occurs regularly throughout the development process. This close collaboration between the project team and the customer guarantees that the project team is providing the customers with practical, efficient solutions. By regularly communicating with the customer and incorporating their comments or feedbacks into the development process, you can reduce risk and do away with guessing. Responding to change over following a plan. So, an important benefit of the Agile methodology is that it encourages frequent reviewing and retooling of current plans based on new information that the team is continually gathering and analyzing. So the product roadmap is now a dynamic plan or strategy rather than a static blueprint or document. So product managers working in agile environments must have the ability to transparently present their dynamic roadmaps to stakeholders while taking into account the potential for change as a result of fresh insights. So to put it another way, the Agile methodology enables a product team to modify its goals, priorities, and plans whenever doing so makes strategic sense. These teams do not get stuck in an outdated and old plan simply because they have committed to seeing it through. So finally, do not forget that Agile is a mindset, not a set of strict rules to follow. And these values are up for interpretation and are not solid instructions set in stone. 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto lists 12 principles. Let us look at what those 12 principles are. So here are some of the principles that need to be followed to make a process agile. Principle number 1, customer satisfaction through early and continuous delivery. The original formulation of this agile principle says, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of the valuable software. However, it is perfectly applicable in areas outside of software development. The best strategies to guarantee customer satisfaction while consistently providing excellent software are to release early, iterate regularly, and continuously listen to your customer or listen to the market dynamic. So Agile principles advocate reducing the period of time between conception and launch of the product, in contrast to conventional or traditional approaches to product development, which are known for their long development cycles. So the goal is to deliver a functional product in the hands of the clients as quickly as possible. This means that product managers will be able to swiftly launch a minimal viable product, an MVP, and use it to get feedback from actual end users. And future versions of the product will be influenced by these customers' feedbacks, which is subsequently pushed back into the product development. So this is how this particular principle is used in reality. First, the product teams will use the MVP and quick experimentations to test the hypothesis and verify the various concepts. Secondly, a constant feedback cycle between the end users and the product team is fueled by frequent releases. And thirdly, the iterations would continue to make small adjustments to the product based on consumer and market feedback rather than delivering a completed version of the product. So as you can see, customer satisfaction is the first principle of Agile, and also the possibility of satisfying customer requests rises with early and continuous delivery, which also helps to accelerate return on investment. So prioritizing on customer satisfaction will make your process more adaptable and enable quick responses to changes. However, because they will regularly receive the value they are paying for, your end users or your clients will be pleased. And additionally, they will be able to provide you feedback earlier on, allowing you to lessen the probability that you will need to make big adjustments later on. Principle number 2, welcome changing requirements even late in the project. The original formulation of this second Agile principle says that even late in the development process, accept changing requirements. Agile methodologies harness change for the benefit of the customer's competitiveness. Change requests should, however, always be welcome. even when the project is nearing its conclusion. So conventional software or product development models were frequently change adverse, because before development started, specific, well-documented plans were developed and were considered final, regardless of subsequent discoveries. In traditional project management, any adjustments made at the very end of a project are typically treated skeptically, since they typically indicate scope creep and greater expenses. But with Agile, teams strive to accept uncertainty and recognize that even a last-minute adjustment may still be very valuable to the client. So teams should not have any trouble responding to those changes promptly because of the iterative nature of Agile approach. Agile principles include analyzing shifting markets, shifting consumer wants or needs, and shifting competition threats in order to adjust the course when necessary. So here is how this particular principle is done in practice. First of all, the Agile teams are guided by high-level strategic goals, and the success of this particular team is measured by the amount of progress made toward those strategic goals rather than by delivering a predefined set of features. Secondly, the Agile team has to keep a close eye on the market, monitor the customer's feedback, and any other elements that might affect the direction of the product. And also, when necessary, the project plans must be updated to better meet the customer and the business needs. And then thirdly, the product strategy and tactical plans are assessed, evaluated, modified, and communicated on a regular basis to reflect changes and new findings. So therefore, the Agile team has to adequately manage executive stakeholders' expectations and make sure they understand the reason behind any change that may affect the project, the course of the project. Principle number 3, deliver value frequently. The original formulation of this third Agile principle says that deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter time scale. So it is fair to say that this principle became necessary due to the vast volumes of documentation that were required as part of the planning process in traditional software development models in the late 90s. So by paying attention to this principle, you will logically shorten the time period you spend in planning and devote more time working on the project. So the Agile mindset encourages shipping numerous iterations for smaller, more manageable components of a product. So therefore, adopting an Agile methodology and including more frequent mini releases of your product might speed up its development. So by using shorter development cycles of smaller product components instead of lengthy documentation creation processes used in waterfall product development, Agile methodology saves a lot of time. And additionally, using a frequent release strategy gives the Agile teams more chances to get feedback from the customers who view each new release. So this feedback helps the team validate the product ideas and strategies. Here is how this principle works in reality. First, Agile development cycles, sometimes known as sprints or iterations, are used to divide the product into manageable pieces that may be finished in a certain amount of time. The sprint will usually last between 2 and 4 weeks. And then, secondly, another alternative to Agile sprints is continuous deployment. So continuous deployment is a method of shipping the software frequently, and it relies less on the present time boundaries and more on making decisions and acting upon them. Principle number 4, close daily cooperation between business people and the developers. The original formulation of this fourth Agile principle says that business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. That means that Agile relies on cross-functional teams to make communication easier between the many stakeholders in the project. So the success of every project or team depends on effective communication, and Agile principles essentially demand that it takes place every day. You can also note that in a knowledge work context that is not directly linked or related to software development, you can replace the word developers by engineers or designers or by whatever best suits your situation. You can also remember that the objective here is to create a synchronization between the people who create value and those who plan or sell it. A successful product requires insights from both the business and technical sides of the company, which can only happen if these two teams work together consistently. So regular communication between business people and technical people, that is to say developers, helps improve alignment across the organization by building trust and transparency. So here is how this particular principle is used in reality. So first of all, the product team is part of the cross-functional agile product development teams. So by bridging the gap between the technical and the business components of the company, this indicates that the product is represented on the development team. And secondly, one method many agile companies employ to put this notion into effect and keep everyone engaged is through daily update meetings or daily stand-up meetings. Principle number 5, build projects around motivated individuals. So the original formulation of this 5th agile principle states that you need to build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. The whole idea behind this principle is that by minimizing micromanagement and giving more authority to motivated team members, the project will be finished more quickly and more effectively. And what this principle means is that if you do not trust your team and keep even the smallest choices in your business centralized, you will only reduce or hinder your team's participation. So as a consequence, people will not even feel like they belong to the goal that the project is aiming to achieve, and their full potential will not be realized. So the Agile methodology places a strong emphasis on giving teams and people liberty and trust. So prior to starting a project, roles must be precisely defined and the Agile team must be properly assembled to contain the necessary individuals and skill sets. So Agile, however, does not allow for micromanagement or hand-holding after the job has begun. So here is how this principle is put into practice. First of all, before development begins, the product owner must make sure that the engineering team is aware of the strategies and needs of the project. This entails not just sharing user stories, but also the overall picture presented in the product roadmap with the cross-functional team. Second, the product owner is not obligated to specify how something should be constructed, but he must communicate the what and the why. So it is the development team's job to figure out how to build the features of the software. Additionally, the product owner does not need to micromanage results during the sprint, but rather it must be accessible to respond to inquiries or questions and offer assistance as required. Principle number 6, the most effective way of communication is face-to-face. So the original formulation of this Agile principle states that the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. So what this means is that by speaking to people in person, you can easily ask a question and get a quick response. These days, there are a lot of dispersed and remote development teams. Therefore, this particular principle is subject to some criticism. However, at its core, successful communication with developers entails moving these discussions away from, software applications or emails in favor of greater face-to-face engagement, even if it is done via video conference calls. So this principle's overarching goal is to promote genuine real-time communication between the product owners and developers about the product. So it needs a high-level strategy guiding those things. So in practice, this is what you need to do. You need to organize daily stand-up meetings, for example. You need to organize collaborative backlog grooming sessions as well. You need to organize sprint planning meetings to to plan for your sprints. You need to organize frequent demos of the application of the new functionalities being developed. And you can also put in place, a strategy of pair programming in your development team, etc., etc. So in order to allow for face-to-face communication for the team to communicate face-to-face. Principle number 7, working software is the primary measure of progress. So the 7th Agile principle states that a working software is the primary measure of progress. This principle is really direct and straightforward. It simply says that it makes no difference how many hours you put in the project, how many problems you were able to squash, or how many lines of code the team wrote. But if the outcome of the project does not correspond to the customer expectation, then you are in trouble. So with Agile, the team should be focused on producing software because that's the primary mission. So working software is more important than perfect, extensive documentation. And this kind of reasoning pushes for speedy product release rather than letting paperwork or the idea that something shouldn't be finished until it's perfect become an obstacle in the project. So let's say that a functional product that customers like is the ultimate barometer for success. And in reality, this is how this particular principle is applied. First of all, instead of completely developed feature sets, minimum viable features are designed and released frequently. And these minimum viable features are the simplest things we can deliver to begin gathering user inputs and validating as we continue to create the product or software. And secondly, we can say here that in reality, a fail-fast attitude means pushing through uncertainty and quickly testing ideas. And thirdly, we can also add that software should be released often. A good product today is preferable than a perfect one later. So let's talk about principle number 8, which is maintain a sustainable working pace. So the original formulation of the 8th Agile principle states that Agile processes promote sustainable development. So the sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. The prime objective when putting Agile into practice is to prevent overload and optimize workflow so the Agile team can quickly deliver to the market and adapt to change without needing individual heroism from the team. Keeping up with a demanding quick release schedule can be tough for the team, especially when the expectations are too high. So Agile principles urge us to keep this in mind and make clear, reasonable expectations. So the goal here is to maintain a positive work-life balance and maintain a good morale among cross-functional team members to avoid issues like burnout or turnover. So practically, this is how you can apply this particular principle in your team. The first one, prior to each sprint, the quantity of work that may be committed to must be carefully considered. The development teams are careful not to make promises they are unable to keep, and setting output expectations for development teams through effort estimations is a standard approach. Secondly, what will get done during a sprint is decided upon by everyone except in exceptional circumstances. So no new tasks should be added to a sprint once it has started. Thirdly, in order to filter out from other stakeholders and prevent adding more unnecessary work during the current sprint, product owners should serve as gatekeepers in order to prevent these extra tasks to overload the work of the development teams. And fourth, the cross-functional teams' psychological safety should be encouraged by product owners in order to foster open communication and unrestricted input. So principle number 9, continuous excellence enhances agility. The original formulation of the 9th Agile principle says that continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. So while the Agile concept promotes shorter development cycles and more frequent releases, it also emphasizes the value of maintaining order and cleanliness to prevent future issues. So although it is of the highest significance to them, product owners frequently overlook this element of development since they seldom spend their days wading through the code bases of their product. So still, any sector may benefit from the 9th Agile management concept. So maintaining operational excellence will make it easier for you to remain agile and respond to changes. And in practice, this is how this principle is applied. First of all, the team must be aware of the technical debt and how any new features or efforts added to the backlog may affect technical debt. To determine if and under what circumstance, the team must be aware of technical debt and how many new features or efforts added to the backlog may affect technical debt. To determine if and under what conditions technical debt is acceptable, developers and product owners must collaborate. Secondly, product owners will need to regularly devote the development resources to refactoring efforts. So refactoring must be a constant concern. It cannot be an afterthought. Principle number 10. Simplicity is essential. Simplicity is essential. The original formulation of this principle says that simplicity, which is the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. This can be a bit unclear. However, it is quite useful and practical. This principle simply means that if you can do something in a simple way, why spend time complicating it? Customers are not compensating you for the work you put in. They are investing in a solution for a particular issue they are having. So when implementing Agile, you should keep that in mind and avoid doing something just for the sake of doing. The 80/20 rule, which states that you can often get 80% of your desired results with just 20% of the work, is definitely something you have heard about. So thinking in this way and taking action where it can have the biggest impact and are encouraged by Agile principles. So Agile practices discourage developing features just for the sake of doing it, but they rather highlight the significance of being strategic and working with a purpose. And in reality, this is how this principle works. First of all, product owners need to be highly selective about which user stories and features actually get implemented, and they must carefully connect product strategy with corporate goals. And secondly, Agile short sprints offer numerous chances for quick testing and experimentation, which can help to lessen the ambiguity surrounding whether initiatives will actually have the anticipated impact. An excellent technique to filter out bad ideas and uncover good ones is to use experiments to evaluate concepts before developing them. Principle 11, self-organizing teams generate most value. The original formulation of this principle says that the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. So the principle means that when provided with freedom, motivated teams generate the most value for the customer. In case you have to push your team and drive them forward, maybe you are not ready for Agile, or you need to make some changes to your leadership style. So most traditional software development models use pyramid-shaped teams where management makes key decisions for project team members, whereas self-organizing teams that operate under a more flat management style where decisions are taken by the group as a whole rather than by a single manager or management team are recommended by Agile principles. So the idea is to let teams collaborate how they see fit, and it's related to the Agile value on interactions and people being over processes and technologies or tools. So here is how this particular principle is applied in reality. So self-organizing teams are independent units within an organization that take charge of their individual initiatives and claim ownership of them. So organizations apply this idea in different ways. So principle number 12 that says regularly reflect and adjust your way of work to boost effectiveness. So the original formulation of this principle says that at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So this principle has to do with assessing or evaluating the agile team performance and figuring out where you can do better. So by doing this, you will be able to explore and continually enhance the performance of the agile team. If things don't turn out the way you had hoped, talk about what went wrong and make changes to get things back on track. So because with Agile, there is no space for we can't change because we've always done this way. As we continually learn new information about our customers and market, we also gain knowledge through the methods we use to get that information. So Agile emphasizes on continual improvement rather than adhering to a rigidly defined methodology for each sprint and release. So additionally, teams and processes must be included in the continuous development. And in practice, this is how to apply this principle. So testing and experimentation are not just restricted to the product. Process experimentation is also encouraged within agile teams. You can believe you are doing something well just to try a different approach and find a solution that's even more efficient. Experimenting with your process and team is just as important as experimenting with the software you are building. Secondly, we can say that the team may review what went well, what didn't go so well, and how the process might be improved in the future at regular retrospectives. They are a great way of product owners and managers to assess how well they are supporting developers before, during, and after sprints, and how well they are communicating with developers. And thirdly, another thing to keep in mind with regards to the agile concept is that in order to put into practice successfully, you need to establish a culture of trust and transparency that promotes openness and regular feedback exchange. Agile is neither a method nor a framework. It's a collection of principles and guidelines. So because of this, it's quite adaptable and may be used by many organizations. So however, you must have the required groundwork in place in order to shift successfully. You achieve the groundwork by putting the 12 agile principles we've just talked about here into practice.